So here we are today outside of Laphroaig. I'm doing the Distillers Wares tour, and then we're going to try and find our plots, I think. Again, it's a lovely, lovely distillery out by the coast, really scenic. It's going to be great fun to explore.
The visitors centre is well laid out and nicely furnished. It's fronted by the gift shop, and there is also a comfortable tasting lounge with a great selection of Laphroaig whiskies behind the bar, as you'd expect. There's a wide range of merchandise and gifts available, as well as a few distillery exclusive bottlings on display on the rear wall. Behind the shop is a great little Laphroaig museum with stacks of distillery history and articles to explore at your leisure. And one of the most interesting takeaways for me was the role that Ian Hunter played, successfully promoting Laphroaig as a medicine during the US Prohibition and stumbling across all those redundant ex-bourbon casks perfect for aging scotch in. The tour kicked off at the back of the museum, where we had a brief run through the history before moving into the floor maltings. Although they only smoke about 20% of their own malt, with the rest being sourced from the Port Ellen maltings at a much lower ppm, their multiple malting floors gave a great demonstration of the process. The workers now have power-assisted agitators to aid in the turning of the malt and ploughs and conveyors to move it through to the smoking floors, making the task much less labour-intensive and avoiding the physical deformities which were all too common. The smoking rooms are positioned adjacent to the malting floors, closed behind ominous-looking red doors. Inside you get a great visualisation of where the peat flavours actually transfer over to the barley and eventually get carried over to the whisky. We were given some to taste and it was honestly delicious, like bacon flavoured crisps. Directly below these rooms is the source of the smoke, the two peat kilns where the peat is burnt off. The peat is manually cut from a bog between Port Ellen and Bowmore. Having been previously submerged under the ocean, this peat bog carries a lot of distinct oily, salty and briny flavour, which Laphroaig is so well known for. The peat is not dried like other distilleries, which helps to retain the natural oils. We were given opportunity to chuck some peat into the kiln before stepping outside for a breather in front of the Hollow of Broad Bay, after which the distillery is named. Next we moved over to the full lauter stainless steel mash tun, which was in the process of being filled to its 5.5 ton capacity. Adjacent to this were the 6 washbacks. Again, these are all stainless steel construction. A relatively short fermentation time of around 52 hours is utilised. We were given opportunity to taste the wash, which was a very cloudy milk colour. Unexpectedly, it was quite fruity and creamy, with a smoky punch only coming in later. All of the spent grist is deposited into a silo where it's collected by local farmers for feed. Laphroaig operate an interesting combination of 3 wash stills and 4 spirit stills. The wash stills are considerably larger and have tall tapered necks, whereas the spirit stills vary slightly but all have a narrow aperture leading to a bulbous neck. All stills have inclined lion arms helping to induce reflux, and all of them feed into shell and tube condensers. The tasting was held in their warehouse number 1, the building with Laphroaig painted on the side of it, and consisted of 3 single casks. After tasting the 3 casks, we were going to get to valence our own sample to fill a 250ml bottle with. The first cask was a 14-year-old ex-bourbon cask of 52.7% ABV. It was quite an angry whisky with a lot of hot pepper, didn't pull any punches. Some soft wood and kipper notes hidden behind the heat though. The second was a 7-year-old Oloroso cask at 59.8%. This presented an interesting combination of sweet nuts, fruits and a briny seaweed. The third and final was a 13-year-old which was matured for 5 years in a bourbon cask before being transferred to a Pedro Jimenez cask. Oodles of raisins, Christmas cake and chestnuts. It was very sweet but with a salty hint, and that was all that hinted at it being a Laphroaig really. The ex-bourbon was a little too aggressive and abrasive for me, and the Pedro Jimenez had sacrificed too much of the Laphroaig DNA to make way for a lovely but fairly typical sherried style, so I chose to fill my bottle with the young but interesting Oloroso aged whisky. We didn't manage to go find our plots because there's issues with the computer system and they can't pull up our coordinates. They did offer that we just go walk in the field and jam a flag down wherever we feel like it, but that seems like cheating a little bit, so we'll just have to come back. It's got plenty of character, it's really well laid out, the tour was great, actually getting hands on and getting stuck in was really fun. The single casks were pretty special, it was interesting to see. I actually got to stick my finger into the low wine spirit and taste that, and it was incredible to see just how much of the distillery character was actually coming through in the distillate prior to
to even being aged. It was quite briny and peaty and barley. It was good.
I fell asleep.
It's definitely one that's worth coming back to when Joe can join in, I think. Now I thought it'd be quite cool to do a bit of a vicarious tasting and share with you guys this whiskey. Now that I've come away from the distillery and I've got a clean palate, just help you to appreciate quite what kind of thing you would actually get and share in the dunnage warehouse at Laphroaig. So here it is. So it comes away in this nice little presentation box, and tucked away inside there is a mini Glencairn and your hand-filled bottle with your own little written label on it. Oh. Get in and crack it open. There's actually some little bits of sediment and cask jar floating around in there. Truly authentic whiskey. Bob on. So the first thing to appreciate is the colour here. This is a first fill Oloroso cask, so it's a nice deep golden old Bordeaux, or about a shade 14. Lovely natural colour. So just to quickly recap, this is a 7-year-old cask number 3614, and it's bottled at 59.8%. So really good strength for delivering all of those flavours. Let's go in and try it on the nose. So there's a really strong ashy smoke, that's what's coming through first and foremost. A slight briny saltiness. And it's interesting that those tones, although they're prominent now, they were really subdued whilst I was at the distillery after having had the other whiskies, but also in that environment, soaking up all of that, just, you know, it's saturated on your olfactory bulb from inhaling. A really lovely woody tone. But then behind that there's like a kind of a fruit compote, syrupy sweet tone. It's berry fruits, some earthy nuts, kind of a little bit rubbery, but in a very soft, a very subdued way. A touch of buttery popcorn begins to come through. This is really testament to just how much the environment that you're tasting, you're sampling in really affects the whiskey. Because it's a stark contrast to what I remember the whiskey being whilst I was at Laphroaig. You can probably tell just by comparing to the notes that I flashed up on screen before. So let's see how that transfers onto the palate. Wow. Whoa. Now, it's stupid, but this is the kind of whiskey that I get truly excited about. Authentic, straight from the cask, you cannot get any better than this. So all of those fruits are amplified and the sweet tones are amplified on the palate, and it transitions from, it kind of swaps over from nose to palate, but then into the finish you get this wave of smoky, medicinal, everything you expect from Laphroaig. But it's such a soft entry to the palate, soft and rich. Buttery popcorn again. So it enters with this really nice, soft and rich fruity tone. It's red fruits, it's sweet, kind of raspberries, that kind of thing. And then just as you begin to settle and acclimate to that, it punches you with a load of the heavy, the woody tones, the medicinal. Ooh. Mouthfeel is really lovely and full. It's not overly thick, you know, it's not like a Bruichladdich oiliness, but it's mouth coating, it's full. I really wish I had a full bottle of it. Going back to the nose, now that you've had it on the palate and you've appreciated the finish, those fruity tones really begin to pop. It becomes much sweeter, and the harsher, smoky, woody tones are a little bit more subdued. Now the finish is at first a wealth of cask char and ashy smoke. Those woody tones, they bubble up, and then there's kind of kippers, saltiness, medicinal, a little bit tarry, and it's not a hugely long finish, but it's very, very warm and pleasant. And there's no point, for this strength, there's no point at which it gets a little bit too prickly or aggressive. It's pleasant the whole way through, but it's got so much character. Now that, as it stands at cask strength, is a fantastic whiskey, probably the best Laphroaig I've ever had. I'd rate it a 92, 93, a really, really strong character profile, a lovely development. It chops and changes as you're appreciating it, loads more to go back and appreciate, and it's only 7 years old.
I mean, incredible. But I do need to pour some more, of course, because I didn't try it with any water. Yeah, that's a good excuse. Now I do have a preference for the higher ABVs, so typically touch of water doesn't really improve things for me. Bearing that in mind, I'm going to go in slow, just a touch of water at a time, and see if it opens any more layers, see if it brings out more character or not. Just a touch. Now that's a minimal change, so I'm not expecting to see a great deal of variance. Kind of bringing out an orange citrusy tone and maybe some caramel, accentuating that buttery popcorn and rubber. Still very nice, slightly different, but I wouldn't say worse. On the palate, those sweet tones seem a little subdued. You know, it's more woody and cask char, which I wouldn't say is preferable. Let's see if a little bit more redeems it. Now that's probably brought it down somewhere around 50–48%. Now that's interesting, that buttery popcorn is really front and centre. It smells really thick, if that makes sense. Much more brown sugars. Maybe some dried fruit peels, but not really very fruity at all. Still plenty of sweetness, and I think the prickle is a little bit more prominent now. Wow. That's brought out a lot more heat on the palate. Yeah, for me, definitely don't water it down. It was best at natural cask strength, but that's the conclusion I draw with most things. So it's not obviously Oloroso influence there. There's quite a strong sweetness, but it's kind of a syrupy sweetness, not necessarily fruity or nutty. But the cask char and the woodied notes become way more dominant. Still good, still very pleasant, but I definitely prefer it at full ABV. It loses some of its richness, some of its character, and becomes slightly less Laphroaig-y really, which is odd. A really, really lovely whiskey and a fantastic memento to bring away with you from the distillery. I highly recommend the Laphroaig tour. You know, they are quite touristy, but it's a great tour for a whiskey lover as well, because you actually get a little bit hands-on, you get to try things, get involved, and they don't disappoint beginning to end. Great place. Cheers for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, chuck a like and a comment below and consider subscribing for more whiskey antics. See you next time.